Hey there. Hey there. Welcome to another Queer Money Live. Thank you for joining us. So this week, we've got a question from one of the Queer Money members who actually emailed us. So we're going to be talking about financial stress and reducing financial stress. So we have 5 tips for you that will help you reduce financial stress. So originally what happened was someone reached out to us. We've changed names here, of course, to protect some of the information. But Adam asked us to make sure that we cover this idea of financial stress because of his question. And what we want to do is we want to share with you these tips. We're also going to encourage you to take a look at the Budget Buster bundle that's in the link that is provided on the left, right, up, down, wherever you're seeing that link. What we want to do is we're going to show you how this Budget Buster bundle is just a part of how you can answer this question of how do I reduce the stress in my life when it comes to finance. So I want to use an analogy here around this idea of stress and being prepared. So you may remember a time period when you were in school and you showed up in class and either you were aware of it and didn't prepare, or you weren't aware of it and didn't prepare, and your teacher said, "Today is a pop quiz." How did you feel? Obviously, you felt full of stress, right? You were stressed out that all of a sudden here was this test that you were not prepared for at all. Now flip it on the other side. Let's say you knew the test was coming and you prepared for it, or you were familiar or had already read the material that your teacher decided to do this pop quiz on. How did you feel about it then? You felt completely different, right? You were ready, you were prepared. Maybe you had a little bit of stress, but you knew the information, so you're ready to move forward. Well, that analogy applies to the whole idea of financial stress as well. There is proof that shows that when we are prepared financially, it reduces the amount of stress that we have.
Exactly. So in 2011, there was a study published in Time magazine that showed that 25% of happiness is based on managing stress. Now, we all know what having a lot of stress feels like. I think a lot of us have more of it than we would like. But what also came from that study we thought was very interesting was that the best stress management technique, you'll never guess this, it's not meditation, it's not talking with friends, it's not talking to a therapist, it's actually planning. Preparing and planning ahead for whatever might be a stressor, for whatever concerns us, for whatever sort of idiosyncrasies we have that we know that we need to address in advance. It comes down to needing a plan and knowing how to overcome, being prepared to overcome any stress that might come our way.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have financial stress, and I'm going to basically make a blanket statement here that everyone in the LGBT community has, and in the non-LGBT community has some form of financial stress. We do know that there is data out there that shows 57% of LGBT couples worry about money on at least weekly basis. That number even increases as you go from weekly to monthly or bi-monthly. That number continues to increase. So almost all of us are stressing about money to a certain degree. So as John said, we need to come up with a plan. Well, some other data that has come out recently that John and I had access to shows that our community and people in general are not using the tools that are available to us, the basic financial tools that are available to us to manage our money and thus reduce stress. So for example, in Prudential's 2018 financial wellness survey, they pointed out that half of the LGBT community does not even have a simple banking product like a checking or savings account. That's a huge number of us that aren't using basic tools that we need to use to manage all that stress. So if you have a checking account, have a savings account, we want you to use those kinds of basic tools first. If you already have those, some of these other 5 points will work for you. But if you don't have a checking or savings account, please get off of the cash cycle and use a checking and savings account, because it is going to help you alleviate some of these other financial stressors.
Exactly. The second recommendation that we have is to put at least $5 per paycheck into an emergency savings account. Now, hopefully it's within the realm of possibility for most people within this group. Setting aside just $5 every other paycheck, or every paycheck every other week, however that might be for you, can go a long way to abating financial stress down the road. Now, you want to set this money aside, and as David and I like to say, put it arm's length away from you. So put it in a firm or a credit union that you don't already have a relationship with. Don't tie any additional features to the account, like check writing or a debit card. You kind of want it to be a little bit of a challenge to get to, because the idea is you want to use this for true emergencies. It's not for when you might have spent a little bit too much at the bar the other night, or when you need a new television. Those aren't true emergencies. What you want to do is set this aside for those occasions when your tire blows, or you might be sick longer than you have sick days to cover yourself for, or inflation has skyrocketed and you don't have enough food to cover your money to cover the food that you need to put on your table and feed your family. Those are true emergencies that you want to set this money aside for. David and I, did you just do the overdraft one? That's me, right?
Yep.
David and I have access to another study that just came out recently from Overdraft. It's the Overdraft app.
Overdraft apps, yeah.
And they showed that 12% of
the general
population
uses an 12% of the general population uses an overdraft 3 to 9 times a year. 18% of the LGBT community does that same thing. So 50% more of us are actually not using our emergency savings for when these kinds of things happen. We're actually using products that ends up costing us money. So for example, you go to the grocery store, you swipe your debit card, you don't have enough money in your account, your overdraft protection kicks in, but you're charged a fee when that happens. So our community is doing that much more often than the general population. The reason why we wanted to include that in here is that's kind of what an emergency savings account should be for, is to make sure that you are not incurring these kinds of fees. Now, obviously, if you get into the habit of doing this every month, then that's not an emergency savings account. That is a checking account, and you need to stop. You need to break some of those habits. But one of the things that we wanted to tie back to this whole idea of emergency savings is last week in the Queer Money Live, we answered Michael Burke's question about where to put your emergency savings to earn a better interest rate. So John is going to share that link to that particular video. If you have not started an emergency savings, or if you have an emergency savings account now and it's hardly earning anything, take a look at the ones that we talked about in that particular video.
Yeah, I need to take better notes for these.
That's okay.
Sorry.
All right. So our next one.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for joining us.
Our next one, I think, is a very important one that many of us have a hard time with. And this is actually the driver behind some of the reason why Adam asked this question about financial stress. Many of us don't have the courage to say no, especially when it comes to our friends asking us to do things, or even saying that to ourselves when we have a want. So having the courage to say no or building up the courage to say no is a great way for you to start alleviating some of that financial stress. And one of the ways that you can do this is to tell your friends, to tell your family members that you're working on some sort of financial goal, so that you actually give it in a positive light. Rather than saying, no, I can't do that because I don't have any money, say, I'd rather not do that, or no, thank you, because I am saving for X, Y, or Z, or I'm trying to build up an emergency savings account of $500, so I don't want to go out with you all right now. Catch up with me in a month or two, or something like that. A couple of the other things to take into consideration here. Adam said that he had a hard time not giving in to when his friends invited him to do things. So, for example, going to weddings or giving birthday cards out for everyone's birthday. it's wonderful to be able to do those kinds of things. But if doing those kinds of things are causing you financial stress, you want to try to rein that in, slow it down, maybe just focus on your really important friends. Not everyone needs or deserves a birthday card.
Right, exactly. Just give them a spanking. They'll be more than happy with that.
Right.
So David and I know exactly how challenging this is. So for the last couple of years, my family has been planning a family ski trip for this coming March. And we were all on board with it. We actually helped organize things and get things started. And it just turns out that things haven't worked out exactly as we had planned, and our cash flow isn't exactly what we'd expected for the first half of the year. So as much as we didn't want to do it, we had to tell my family the other week that unfortunately we can't go. Now we've already committed some money to it, and so they're going to keep that money so that nobody else has to pay any additional expenses because we have to back out. But it's depressing that we can't go because we were excited about it. It's also was kind of embarrassing to have to say things aren't working out as well for us right now, and we can't. We don't want to spend the money that we have on this vacation because we didn't actually reserve the money we have for the vacation. And that's the other thing, is we don't want to tap into our emergency savings and some other money that we've set aside for a vacation. That's not what it was earmarked for. We want to make sure that we continue to keep autonomous with those expenses. And so we just had to back out. So we understand that it's not easy. It can be sometimes embarrassing, but at the end of the day, nobody in our family questioned why we couldn't go. We just said we're working towards other things. Things haven't worked out exactly as we had expected. So for the time being, unfortunately, we would not be able to go.
Right.
Yeah. So do you want me to take the next one?
Yeah.
The next recommendation that we have for you to help alleviate financial stress is to, and we've been talking about this for years, is to start thinking of ways to increase your income, particularly with additional income streams. We're huge fans, obviously, of blogging. We know a lot of people who make a lot of money from blogging. We know a lot of people who make decent supplemental money from blogging that augments the income that they're getting from a W-2 job. There are a lot of opportunities out there, especially with the gig economy, for freelancing of all sorts. There's like TaskRabbit and Craigslist and all sorts of different tools and apps and resources that you can use to make additional income. Another thing to do, and I think a lot of us don't really consider this because by the end of the day, we're ready to leave our office job or ready to leave the plant. But think about overtime or part-time work. So you can get overtime at your current employer, and typically you'll be able to get a time and a half if you put in more than 40 or 50 hours a week. So that could really increase the income that you're already getting. Another thing, like I said, is part-time work. So whether that's working at a bar or a restaurant in the evening and weekends or a retail job, we know that that's not easy. David and I have done that several times in the past to help reach certain goals or to supplement income that we were earning at the time that wasn't enough. So there are a number of things that you can do. Likewise, number one thing that we often say is to eliminate debt. You spend an inordinate amount of money financing the debt that you have, and if you can reduce that debt, stop paying those interest rates, you can have a lot more extra money for yourself that you can put towards emergency savings or prepare yourself for any other kind of an emergency. And then what I'm going to do here in a second is add an article that we wrote several years ago about 17 ways to find extra money without necessarily having to find an extra job. So check that out for other recommendations that might help alleviate some of your financial stress.
Right. So I'm going to get back to this whole idea of having a plan, since that is the number one way to reduce your stress. So as I mentioned in the outset, if you don't have a plan, then you're probably not planning ahead for things that you want to purchase or need to purchase. And what that plan is a budget. Now, I think a lot of us say we don't like budgets. We hate that word.
Like diet.
Right. John and I say that the reason we like a budget is it tells us what we can and should spend our money on. Doesn't tell us no. It tells us yes for the things that are important. So, for example, if you never want to miss a bill again, if you want to find extra money in your existing income, if you want to stop spending money on things that aren't important to you, all of that is designed to be a part of a budget. And that's what we have in the Budget Buster Bundle. So it's going to help you never miss a bill again, because we're going to set you up on a structure that allows you to not miss your bills again. You're going to find the extra money in your budget, in your income by figuring out what spending is not making you happy. We also have some tips and some tricks in there, some bonuses that will allow you, as I said, to spend on what's important, to actually spend on the things that bring you happiness. We've also included in it some ways to automate your spending, some bonuses around meal planning, and we actually provide some menus and grocery lists for you. All of this helps you reduce your spending, which when you reduce your spending and you focus on what's important and what makes you happy, you help reduce your happiness level goes up, your stress level goes down. And that's what this is all about, right? We want to get you back into that lifestyle of not living paycheck to paycheck, but actually understanding where your money is going, where it's coming from, and where it's going. So if you want to get that Budget Buster bundle, just go ahead and click on the link that's in the comments here.
Yeah, I think most people aren't necessarily so underwater with relative to their expenses and their income. I think most people are simply living paycheck to paycheck. So it's just a very thin ice that people are on, and that's kind of what stresses them out. And we saw a lot of that with the 800,000 or so employees, the government employees who were furloughed for 35 days just a couple months ago or a couple weeks ago. They could only survive missing a paycheck or two before things got really scary for them. So I don't think a lot of people are drowning in debt. I think a lot of people have debt. I don't think they're drowning in debt. And I don't think that people's expenses are so over the top relative to their income that they're just complete messes. I think most people are just kind of skating on thin ice, and the minute it warms up a little bit, it gets a little too hot, then they'll fall through.
Exactly. And unfortunately, it's when you don't have a budget that it's easy then to allow your paycheck to paycheck lifestyle to continue. And then as things increase in price, you're going to find yourself putting more and more of that on a credit card, which then can dig you further and further into a hole. It's what caused us to go into our financial hole is we weren't living based on a budget. We weren't spending based on a budget that would make us happy.
And I think another benefit of the Budget Buster bundle is the dynamic budget that we provide you. And what that would do, if you were one of those 800,000 employees or so who were furloughed, then you would be able to go to the dynamic budget and then say, okay, what are the expenses that we actually don't really need to pay for the next couple of weeks? How can we cut these out of our budget for the near term so that we can have a little bit more cushion until we can go back to work or whatever? So it allows you the opportunity to really figure out how to hyper focus on what you need to do at that particular moment, and then you can kind of breathe a little bit again when you can resume going back to work.
Yep.
So those are our 5 recommendations to help alleviate financial stress. If you have any recommendations or thoughts or things that you've experienced and have worked for you, please share them in the comments. And of course, if you have any questions, share them in the comments, and we'll be sure to follow up. Tomorrow night, we're doing a special DFG Live, not a Queer Money Live, a DFG Live that we host on the Debt Free Guys wall. We're going to talk about how to never miss a bill or pay another NSF again. So join us tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Mountain Time for that. We'd love to have you included in there and participating in that discussion.
Yeah. And then next week, we're going to cover Sarah's question where she asked that if you were to receive a $5,000 bonus, which would be awesome, right? What would you use it to pay off debt or for directed to other goals, funding a vacation or a honeymoon, something like that, or a 3 to 6 month emergency fund? So she gave a number of different suggestions or thoughts. She wants to know how we would prioritize something like that. So we'll cover that next week.
Exactly. And look out we're going to send an invite out today or tomorrow for that. We would love to get your ideas on how you would spend that money. I don't know that our ideas are necessarily the right ideas, and we'd love to hear what you guys have to say. So let us know when we send that invitation out.
Sounds good.
Thanks, and we'll see you hopefully tomorrow night, if not next week.